Don't you hate pants?
Here's Brunette. Brunette's in. Andrew Brunette shot to score. Andrew Brunette in sudden death overtime. And Minnesota is moving on.
I won't need my high school diploma anymore. I am smart. I am smart. I am smart. I am smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T.
Played here by Danny deeply, and out they come 2-on-1. This is Niederreiter holding on to it, and he scores! Nino Niederreiter wins the series for the Minnesota Wild.
And welcome to episode 47 of the Giles and the Goalies podcast. We are live on location here at Tom Reid's Hockey City Pub after a fine evening of drinking and interacting with Wild Twitter. Maybe not the Wild blogging community, but just Wild Twitter in general. I'm Giles. If you can't tell by the sound of my thick Minnesota accent, I got Ben over here laughing.
Yeah.
I guess before we get down to regularly scheduled programming, I do have a few notes to get through from. I guess from the last week in general. First of all, if you plowed through our episode from last week, really a tip of the cap to you. You can have the next beer on me, I guess, because I listened to about 5 minutes of that. That was godly unlistenable.
It was rough.
Obviously, we would have loved to have had a better sounding show with a guest on. If you didn't listen to the end of our show last week, if you didn't make it to the last, I don't know, what was it, 10 minutes with Taylor?
Yeah, about 15, yeah.
Yeah, last 15 minutes. Please remember to check him or his company, Defending the Blue Line. Check them out. You can find them on the interwebs, defendingtheblueline.org. Find them at DEF, the Blue Line on Twitter, or on Facebook, Defending the Blue Line. They do a lot of wonderful things, which we wholeheartedly believe in. So please check them out if you didn't make it to the end of the last show. I obviously wanted to plug that just because I know people might not have listened to the end. Obviously, we want to have Taylor back on again.
Yeah, when you can hear... Well, I mean, you can hear... The nice thing for him was that you could heir him just fine.
Yeah, he had the golden microphone.
Yeah, he had the Brian Reynolds voice of God microphone. Us, on the other hand, we sounded... I don't want to say we sounded like Bender because we didn't sound that cool, but we sounded very robotic, and that was more or less my bad and kind of the setup that we were running with. But now, sitting in front of me is a fancy-dancy mixer.
My second point was immediately after we listened to last week's show, we basically decided that it was time to upgrade the audio equipment.
Yeah.
So as you're listening to this and you're wondering, gee, they sound good, it's because we have new audio equipment. We went out and made the necessary upgrades to bring you a fine-sounding show. So please tell your friends that we're listenable now. So have them check us out.
It's audio quality heaven now.
Yeah. And Dan just sent me a bunch of hands in the air emojis today when I told him that audio equipment was upgraded. So he should be pleasantly pleased with us.
Thus concludes our obligatory mention of Dan every week on the podcast.
Yeah, most likely. And then I guess that was all I had from the last week's show. But third, before we get to unpleasant business, hats off to the Gopher women's hockey team for their second consecutive national championship today, fourth in 5 years. Got to see him last week, and that's a really good hockey team. And as I threw it out on Twitter today, that is an incredible bang for your buck if you're ever looking for one when it comes to sports, and maybe particularly college sports, where notable sports in general in college are.
Giles had a few beers, people.
Yeah.
Just give him some patience.
I don't know what I'm saying.
He's getting there eventually. He's doing a good job working with what he's got.
I feel like Charles Barkley during any time he's on air during the March Madness program. But no, it just at this day and age when premium college sports are very high priced. If you're looking for a very family affordable event to go to, you can do no wrong with Gopher women's hockey. If they're always very good, and as I said, you get a good bang for your buck.
Yep, Ritter is a fantastic place to watch a hockey game.
And as I also kind of threw out, the national championship wasn't unfortunately on TV today, and that's really not going to change until people start filling arenas, because that's just how it is. So please go out, watch them in person, and force a change. So obviously, again, tip of the cap to them. And boy, I tell you, Amanda Kessel's something to watch. Just on TV or on a live stream, but when you see her play in person, it's quite something else. Clearly, one of the better athletes to lace up the skates in women's hockey. So
hashtag better Kessel.
Best Kessel. Tip of the cap to them. But I guess I'll take a sip of Molson here, and we'll cut down to business.
Let's get down to business.
Let me read my notes here. Last week, I think I did say that the Wild had 3 trap games out of 4 this week.
It was trap week.
And in typical Wild fashion, they blew 2 of them. The first 2 against Ottawa, which they lost in the waning seconds of the game.
In overtime.
And then they had a complete disaster of a show in New Jersey. I can't say how I really feel about it because this is a family-friendly podcast. And then they just grinded out a pair of shootout wins against Carolina and Chicago.
Who saw that coming? Yeah, and the Carolina win, let's not get too excited about that because it is a shootout win. So that, a win is nice, and the 2 points were great, but, they do, a tiebreaker. The first tiebreaker for the playoffs is regulation and overtime wins. So that, while it was a win, and obviously they should have gotten the 2 points, it's almost like a 1.5 point win almost because they got it in the shootout. So that just further puts them behind the 8 ball against the Avalanche when it comes to those regulation overtime wins that are the first tiebreaker. So be aware of that shootout victory against Carolina and even tonight against the Blackhawks. Those could come back to haunt this team a little bit, even though they got 2 wins out of both of them.
And as we're recording here, the Avalanche did close out their win against Edmonton. So the Wild finished the week a point behind the Oilers with 9 games remaining in the regular season. I guess here early in the week, at least to you, I had a lot of frustrations, particularly with the New Jersey game, which I guess I just put a lot of emotions out there on Twitter in general. Usually if you follow me on the Twitter machine, I just do more of the joke variety of things, but a lot of what I said on Thursday night was more of a serious nature, and I still can't quite put my finger on this team. They lost those 2 winnable games early in the week, and then they just grind out 2 wins here to end the week. And for 10 months, I've been trying to figure out this team, and I can't, and I still can't. And there's just a myriad of issues still. And
you're not alone, and I think that's. I would like to meet somebody who thinks they do have this team figured out. Because certainly we see a lot of tweets. Lord knows we see a lot of tweets of people that think they do have this team figured out, but really. No one does. No one does.
I think Michael Russo has his team figured out, but he just can't say.
No, I'm not discrediting his knowledge of the situation either. But I think that you can tell by the stuff that he says too sometimes that this team just absolutely flabbergasts Michael Russo, he's been in the game a long time. He's a fantastic beat writer, and you've never seen everything, but if anybody's come close, it's Michael Russo. He's seen just about everything, and I think this team still to this day confounds him a little bit, and that says something. It's not just us slack-jawed Yokel fans that are confused by this product on the ice. When it's Michael Russo. It's clearly the front office. The front office has no freaking idea what's going on with this team. And that's not even really necessarily a Fletcher bashing comment, but it's just nobody gets it. Nobody knows. Fletcher can say the answer is in the room all he wants. He's right. It is. But that doesn't mean that it makes sense. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Giles and the goalies, the slack-jawed Yokels. After the first 2 games this week, I was more or less done with this team, and even Saturday they went against Carolina in a shootout, and that's nothing to put your hat on because it's a shootout win against a
terrible team,
pretty garbage team, but then they somehow sneak out a win against Chicago in the United Center, and as I said, as we were sitting here watching the game, if we played 82 games against the Blackhawks every year, we'd probably be pretty darn good because we always seem to play with an edge when it comes to the Blackhawks, and it's those lesser teams, the trap games, which we saw earlier in the week, that it just bothers me so much.
Well, the whole trap game thing is something that you and I have been kind of railroading on all season, because and it goes back to something that we've both also railroaded on all season, is this team being mentally weak, mentally fragile, et cetera, et cetera. Just this team. You're going to sing while he's doing the mic. If this team had the spines, if this team had the huevos,
if they had, to quote Hiroshi Tanaka from Major League 2, marbles.
Yes. If they had that, they wouldn't be taking teams like New Jersey and Ottawa and Carolina so freaking lightly that they end up crapping the bed against them. And then all of a sudden, we're in Chicago and we need to get a W here. Let's play our ass off and win this game, and they do. It took to a shootout, but, they're 4-0 against Chicago this season. And that should say something. Chicago is, wherever they are in the central standings, they're a hell of a team. And when you can beat them on a, now to the point where you can call it a consistent basis, but you're struggling against the just dumpster diving teams of the NHL, it doesn't make any sense. And that just goes along to, the motivation factor of this team, the mental strength of this team, the fortitude intestinal fortitude of this team.
Quick, I forgot this in my opening notes. Quick note that had nothing to do with anything you just said, but
great.
I forgot to shout out Carrie, who put on the party at Tom Reid's tonight. I did tell her I was going to give her a shout out for this because she took off before we started recording. So I'll make a note of the time. Hopefully I'll remember what time this is, but just giving her a shout out for putting all this on tonight because it was pretty fun to be around Wild Twitter. And as I said to somebody else in the bar here tonight, it was just a little bit refreshing to just be around people who still kind of had a positive outlook on this team. And regardless of what I personally think of this team, it's still refreshing to be around people who still, hope for the better with this team, even this season.
Well, it was a bunch of fans, and we surround ourselves, especially on Twitter. It's a community, and I love it. I do love the Wild Twitter community, with all the bloggers included. But when you get around, when it's just us bloggers and us people who write about the team, this kind of team wears on you, and you become, I don't think that any of us weren't cynical before this, but this certainly doesn't help. This team, I don't need help being a cynic, and this team is playing Bohemian Rhapsody, and Giles and I desperately need to do the Wayne and Garth moment from Wayne's World.
It's getting me. It's getting me good here.
That and all the Molsons you had.
Hey, I got another.
Yeah, there's a table next to us. Cheers. For what reason, I'm not exactly sure.
They're fired up.
They are.
I don't know. I guess. Do you have anything else to add from this week? Because it just, I didn't see the Carolina game because we were tied up, and we watched the Chicago game tonight, and it just, my final takeaway was this team tried tonight. Where has this team been?
Yeah.
Why are you not here all the time? Like. That's all I want. If you try and you lose, that's one thing. But when you just don't try, like we saw in New Jersey the other night, that's just a whole different story.
Right.
And that's just what gets me.
Well, that's just it. And some people are like, well, teams lose, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, well, I get that. But when was the last time this team lost and you were like, hey, you know what? Hell of an effort. You had a bad bounce. You had maybe a shoddy call not go your way, whatever, whatever the reason may be. But when was the last time this team lost and you were okay with it? I mean, aside from the whole playoffs scenario, when was the last time they lost and you're like, you know what? It happens. And because, hockey
it's been a few years.
I do think we had losses like that early in the season. But I don't think we've had one in I don't know, I can't think of the last one in recent memory in months.
At least since I think it was their 41st game when they set the franchise record for best first half in team history. Which feels like ages ago.
Oh my God, yes.
We certainly haven't seen anything like that, and
that is going to be just an absurd trivia question. 5 years from now, I'd be like, do you remember the best team at the halfway point of the season? That would be the 2015-16 team, and people are going to be like, wait, what?
Yeah, they'll look in the record books and they'll just wonder what happened to this team. And as I was telling somebody tonight, we're going to see Mike Yeo move on, and we're going to see him do well somewhere else. And that's a whole different topic that we can probably table for the off season, which could just be 3 podcasts away.
Yeah. He's going to be the Wild's David Ortiz.
Yeah, as I said, oh God. Let me tell you, I was up late last night, and I got up this morning, Sunday, and you open up Twitter and you just see this just hot takes discussion on David Ortiz and the Twins, and you're just like, why did I wake up?
Yeah.
Like,
there's definitely times where I regret opening my Twitter app. And as much as I love Twitter, there's definitely times where I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to close this now. And, I'm going to switch over to I don't know, Tinder, because that's more productive than being on Twitter right now. Like, it gets that bad sometimes where it's just like, you know what? I just need to shut this app and not go back on for a good hour or two.
Wow. When you're turning off Twitter in favor of Tinder.
That's the point that I'm trying to make drastic points here. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I'm just going to quick steer that away, and I guess we're going to move on.
Good call.
Yikes. Wow. I guess our next topic, I guess, is I don't know if you haven't listened to the most recent Russo Suhan podcast before the Carolina game at Tom Reid's. I would suggest you do so, because Ben was next to me for listening to half of that show, and then I finished the second half of it, and as I tweeted, you just kind of needed a cigarette after finishing it, and there was just a lot to digest.
Yeah.
And
your reaction to it was so extreme, and not in like an over the top kind of way, but like such a I don't know, incredulous, maybe, I guess would be the best word. Your reaction to it was like, it's not often for me to be like, oh, I need to plug in this podcast right now and listen to it. And so I did, and I heard, at least the snippet of what really hooked you. But yeah, I mean, kind of mind-blowing stuff, like not mind-blowing in that you never saw it coming or you're completely shocked by it, but it's mind-blowing in that where it's like, really, like, incredulous. I mean, you were incredulous, and any Wild fan that heard what was said should be.
It's so difficult to. It took a lot to process everything that was said, and I guess my takeaway is, this was a team that was built up as, a very high character team, and what we're getting at now is this is not a high character team, and there's just a lot of different factions in the locker room, and it has just gotten so bad. And keep in mind, this was all said before the Carolina game, before they did reel off 2 wins. But as Mike said, even when things were going right, this stuff was never fully gone.
Yeah.
So I guess just to me, it's just, that's the biggest thing, is this team was billed as very high character team, and they were beyond this kind of stuff, and that's just turned out to not be the case. And now we're at the point where columnists are ripping Parisi, which isn't totally out of the realm. And I crunched some numbers before the show. I actually did some homework before the podcast, which is a first in the history, the 47 episode history of the show. I did some research, and as Mike laid it on pretty thick to the veterans and those who have a sweater patch on their uniform, I did some research, and here was the bad that I found from this team recently in games that they've needed to win against, not good teams. The captain, Mikko Koivu, has 7 points in his last 14 games. This was all of these stats, please keep in mind, all these stats were before the Chicago game. So please keep that in mind as I'm just not
But
coherent enough at this point to try to
none
figure
of them
them on the fly. Right.
in this game. I mean, I don't know. I didn't see the assists, but none of them scored this game. So
Koivu had 7 points in 14 games in the last 14 games. Zach Parise had 2 goals in the last 23 games and 3 points in the last 8 games. Before he was scratched the last 2 games, Tom Vanek had 3 assists in 10 games. In the last 5 games, Ryan Suter had 1 assist, and he's getting 28 minutes a night.
yeah,
That is awful.
Yeah.
For as much as this team prided themselves on having a great core of veteran leaders, they were not showing it at all. At any point that, we're beyond this. They were not. And if anything has gone right lately, it's been the young guys who have seemingly split off into their own little faction on the team, if you will. And I also crunched those numbers. And we have Nino Niederreiter, 14 points in the last 17 games. And Charlie Coyle had a 4-game assist streak coming into the Chicago game, and he had points in 5 of 6. Eric Holla had also a 4-game point streak going into Chicago, which he extended because he had a goal.
yep.
So that was a 5-game point streak, and he had, at least 17 points in his last 21 games. These guys have stepped up when others haven't.
And the crazy thing is like that is what this team needed. That's what the hope was when they brought in Parise and Suter. Like, all right, well, we've got Parise and Suter, we've got Koivu. You just hope that the kids step up their game enough to build around those guys. Because those guys were proven commodities. They were stars. You bring in Pominville, you bring in Vanek, and then you think, well, if the kids can just get good enough, and that was the key for almost everybody going into the last 2 seasons at least was, hey, can these kids start playing up to the level the veterans are at, and then we can, really put a good team out on the ice. And it's just gone like the complete opposite way. I mean, Coyle and Niederreiter are the stars of this team now, and anybody in denial of that, I think, just really hasn't watched this team much, especially lately. And it's like the veteran core of this team they've fallen so hard, so far that they're not even factoring in these games right now.
And what was weird was that in the first half of the year, the veteran guys had really carried the team.
Yeah, yep.
Koivu had a great first half, and Suter was looking sharp, and Vanek was, despite his, flaws in the defensive zone, as some love to point out, he was producing, and everything was, at least on the ice was clicking, but as Mike Yo kind of said after he was let go, that things still never felt right, even when things were going good this year. So it's just a weird situation, and I don't know. This team has left me just speechless at times as to how they've played, and we all know how they play. They can play, as we've seen in Chicago games this year. Wow, they're now 4-0 against the Blackhawks. They can play really well when they want to. The trick is getting them to play when they want to.
Yeah, and that's made it extra frustrating. For you and I writing about this team, it's like, what can we even say at this point? Because typically when you write, you're writing about the ups and downs of this team. Well, when the ups and downs of this team are literally on a night-to-night basis, it makes it extremely hard to write about, well, this team is slumping. Well, this team is on the upswing. Well, when they do it on back-to-back nights, it makes it difficult, for us, and it makes it even more frustrating than the average fan for us to deal with this crap, like it just, and I can't even imagine where Russo's at, because it's just like, he sees and hears so much that he can't publish,
Right.
and he also has to write about this team on a daily, multiple times a day basis, more so than us, and it's just like, where do you even begin? He can't. I'm sure there's stuff that he knows that would make our freaking head spin, but he can't put it out there, and it's just like it's so frustrating, and it trickles on down. I mean, it's not just Russo, it's not just the bloggers, it's the Wild fans too, and I'm sure the team is feeling it too. To their credit, I'm sure that they're probably looking for answers as much as we are. I don't think that they're in their locker room all snickering to each other that hey, we're only putting up half efforts half these games. This is pretty awesome. We're getting paid the same money to do half the work. I don't think that's the situation either. I think they're competitive guys. They're human beings. They want to win, but for whatever reason, it's just not working, and it's created such a maddening, inconsistent mess that I don't know. It's whether they make the playoffs or not. I don't know. It's so hard to get behind this team and to really have any faith in this team on a nightly basis when they're so wildly inconsistent.
I guess my first point there would be, if I was in Russo's shoes for a week, I'm sure my bartenders would be very glad. All the high tabs I would run, because I could only imagine what he knows that we don't, and
Oy.
Yikes.
Yep.
I guess we can.
We could probably move on.
Turn the page here, and
we can move on to brighter.
Before we start pondering what Russo's bar tabs are.
That's a new Twitter account.
Yeah. I guess looking ahead to the next week here, the Wild have Tuesday at home against Los Angeles. They have.
I want to talk into the mic. That might help.
Sorry, Tuesday at home against Los Angeles. They have Thursday at home against Calgary, and then they hit the road for an incredibly gigantic Saturday road game in Colorado.
Yep.
You got to have, at least 1 out of 2 on the homestand, and you got to have that Saturday game in Denver. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And, I think I mentioned this to you at some point in the last week that, what frightens me about the whole situation is that the Wild may be more talented than Colorado, but, sometimes I wonder if what kills them is them trying. Like, Colorado comes out and tries every night, but their problems are more systematic and personnel, and the Wild have the right pieces to win, more games than none, but, there's just sometimes there's effort, so that's kind of how I feel going into this week.
Yeah, I know we've looked at the schedule up and down, and after the Avalanche game, the Wild don't play another. The only playoff teams they play are Chicago and Detroit, depending on where Detroit is at. And the Avalanche play nothing but playoff teams after they play the Wild on Saturday. So that certainly bodes well for the Wild. But it feels to me, and I don't know how it feels to you, but it feels like Saturday will decide this playoff race.
I would agree.
It just feels, I believe there's 6-7 games for each team after that.
It'll be 6 games after that.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot that can happen, and maybe I'm just completely dead wrong on it. But it just feels like, from a momentum standpoint, from the fact that it's going to be it could be a 4-point swing. I mean, that's the biggest part of it, obviously. it just feels like Saturday is the game. Saturday will decide if this team gets in the playoffs or not. And that's all maybe even dependent on where they are on Saturday. If they don't win Tuesday and Thursday, and Colorado does, and they're 5 points back,
then it won't matter.
On Saturday,
that probably doesn't matter at all.
Then winning that game, it helps, certainly. But they have to be neck and neck with Colorado at that point. That game has to tie Colorado or move past Colorado for it to mean anything for this team.
Say the Wild lose 2 games of regulation this week, and Colorado does. I haven't looked at the schedule, but I'm assuming the Wild and Avalanche have pretty similar schedules from here on out. Say you go into that game on Saturday, and the Wild are 5 points out.
Yeah.
And even if they win, you're 3 points out with 6 games to play. In the NHL these days, that's a lot to make up.
It is.
No matter who you're playing, no matter what the schedule favors.
Well,
that's a lot of points to make up.
And to their credit, Colorado's playing decent hockey right now. They're winning a lot of games. They got to this point, when the Wild slump started, Colorado was in almost the basement of the division. Yeah, I mean they were down there and they worked their way back up. I mean they've literally crisscrossed paths since the first of the year. So that's not a team that's going to go away easily. And Colorado still, for the most part, I mean, especially with this game on Saturday, they control their own destiny because they have the lead right now. They have the lead, and they have a game against the Wild on Saturday. So it's really ultimately up to them. And the Wild just have to hope, pray, and beg that some team, beats Colorado, a couple of times at least, because if they don't get beat a couple of times down the stretch against all those playoffs teams, then the Wild winning in Colorado would be all for naught. So
if you want the Wild to win on Saturday in Denver, a surefire way would be to send me to Denver, where I have an undefeated record. So I'm obviously willing to accept donations for a flight ticket out and back from Denver to see the game. So
get that Kickstarter going.
Yeah, you can get a GoFundMe going.
Yes.
But there's just not much more you can really say than you need to win. You need to win games at this point, and it's really a coin flip with this team right now. And
yeah, it really is.
I'm sure Russo will point out at some point, in the next day or so, that the Wild really play well when it comes to playing the Kings. Which, is very true. They've always kind of had another, kind of like the Blackhawks, where they just kind of play with a chip on their shoulder against the Kings. And so I'm guessing we'll see a good effort out of them. Whether there's a win in there remains to be seen. But then you have Calgary, which just frightens me to death because, first of all, that just reeks of trap game, regardless of who's in goal.
If it was Kerry Ramos, I'd be scared too.
And then the fact of the matter is that Nicholas Backstrom will be in goal for that game is just horrifying. And I guess if I'd have known that a few days ago, I would have gone to the game myself. But I sold my tickets to go work that night.
Yep.
So best of luck to whoever takes my tickets. But you got to win from here on out.
Yep.
That's all there is. And if you want this team to get into the playoffs, boy, that's good on you, because you want this team to just sneak into the playoffs and then get matched up with, essentially, at this point, Dallas or St. Louis. And Dallas, you could have a chance, I guess, and St. Louis too, because they just love to croak in the first round.
You do.
I told you before the show, that's just giving you false hope that you don't need with this team.
Yeah, but you know what? That would be just like this team to go on a run in the playoffs. Because why not? You know? Why not?
Yeah, it would be totally ridiculous for this team to just
nobody would predict it.
Run off a run to the Western Conference or Stanley Cup Finals.
It would just be it would just be absolutely absurd. Like it would be maddeningly frustrating for people who have watched this team since January 1st. But that's just kind of how this team is. And while, you know, I don't want to say I'm apathetic to the Wild making the playoffs at this point, but maybe I'm close. But you know, that's obviously the one, you know, that's the one bright spot, because let's face it, at this point they're not getting a good draft pick out of it. I mean, the odds of them winning the lottery are slim to none because they're not the Oilers, so why would they win the lottery?
They're stuck in just the worst spot.
Yeah,
where they're just like, I don't know if they need to make the playoffs, but then you're like, well, if they miss, they're not going to do anything in the draft lottery. So what?
Yeah. So they're going to pick, you know,
why bother?
Freaking 12th or 11th, and it's like, okay, well, that's going to get us a nice player. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate the idea of picking that high, but it just...
Maybe they'll do us all a solid and maybe draft somebody with a little more scoring upside this time around.
Who knows? After they passed up on Brock Besser,
as much as I love a good two-way forward, eventually you gotta roll the dice and gamble on a score. But again, that's for another podcast down the line.
We got lots of time to talk about that this summer.
That's another. I guess that's another bullet point I was going to bring up at the beginning of the show. You know, no matter what happens here in the last couple weeks of the season, we'll pretty much still be podcasting on a weekly basis. You know, at least through, you know, free agency.
Yeah.
So we're not going anywhere by any stretch of the means.
We're in it for the long haul. Much like we were last season. We took August off, and that was about it.
So, yeah, I mean, when basically all the front offices, you know, go on vacation for a month and a half, you know, we might as well too, since we know nothing's going to go on, and just kind of recharge the batteries.
Yep.
But
it's much needed at this point.
Yeah, I guess we can move on here to another segment that trying to look up on the fly here. Yes, our signature topic.
Indeed.
The jersey segment, and this was the segment I was born to talk about. If you take a quick gander at your calendar, you can see the Wild have 3 teams on the schedule, but none more important than that one on Saturday.
We might have mentioned it.
So we're gonna talk about the Avalanche jerseys a little bit here. I guess, what are your overall thoughts before I take the floor?
I'm just going to throw some stuff out there, and then I'm going to get the hell out of your way. You know, I actually, their initial jerseys, I kind of like them. I think that they fit what they were going for. I've never been a big fan of the foot shoulder patch, because it's like, you know, you're not the Colorado Yeti. But whatever. But I think that the rest of it kind of worked. You know, I'm not a big burgundy guy either, but I think the logo works. I think the design was fairly simple, but it looked mountainous. It looked Colorado. It worked. Then, you know, obviously the edge system hit, and they just threw all the pipings at it, and you know, it was a delicate balance before, because it was a decent jersey, but it just, their jersey, I think maybe of all the rest, show how easy it is to ruin the look of a jersey with all of that unnecessary piping and logoing and all that kind of crap that the edge system brought. And you know, now they changed the shoulder patch to the C from the Colorado flag, and it's just boring as all get up. And and they introduced those third jerseys, and they're kind of based on the Rockies jerseys for the very ill-fated brief franchise there.
How come New Jersey fans haven't highly objected to that?
Because they don't care, because they're not petty like Dallas fans. But it's just like, they're okay, but I don't know. They don't really do much for me. I like their very original jerseys, but since then, I've never really liked any of their third jerseys that much. The one that you just purchased, the blue one, it's all right. I think you got it obviously more for the value of Paul Correa. It's all right jersey, but other than that, the jerseys they wore besides that were kind of awful. So yeah, the original jerseys, not bad. Other than that, not so much.
You hit it there.
You have the floor.
The original jerseys were good. They were solid. They maybe had a little bit of a 90s feel to it.
A little bit, yeah. With the burgundy and the blue.
It was very tame in comparison to ours. They did not have any kind of 90s themed jersey in the 90s.
True.
But it felt like they maybe hit that, maybe 2 decades too late with the cotton candy colored third jerseys that they just gave up last year.
Yeah.
Those blues were hideous. Obviously, you can kind of follow along with us here on NHLuniforms.com, and if you are, you can see that the recent uniform history of the Avs is modeled after Cody McLeod. So that really says all you need to know about this franchise.
I wish I had a drop for poop emoji.
I was, as you hit on, I found a tolerable Avalanche jersey that was, I liked their original thirds. They were very basic, very plain, good-looking jersey, for burgundy.
Yeah.
And obviously it had, it just reeked of a sentimental value with Paul Correa for me. So that was an easy $40 to drop. But really since it's been, hot garbage. And,
as modeled by Cody McLeod.
Was also equally, if not more, hot garbage.
Yeah.
I can't get behind these Rockies jerseys. I think there was a good thought there, but there's just a lot going on that I can't really get behind, and it's also the Avalanche right now, so that maybe clouds my judgment. But
it probably does, and that's a fair criticism of yourself. But it's just, I'm with you. It's just, I think they had
the white shoulders.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think if the shoulders were blue, as the rest of the jerseys are, that navy blue, I think it actually
be a solid jersey.
Yeah, I think it would actually look decent.
If I go in and Photoshop that blue, and you just see, that looks good.
Yeah, it's not bad, But that just, I don't understand the fascination with shoulder yokes. They look good on some teams, sure, but you don't always need them. They're not. Look at Original 6. How many of them have shoulder yokes? 2? 3? I think it's just Montreal. Boston.
I cringe when somebody says Original 6 because it just.
Well, I use those as an example.
Somewhere in the NHL front office, somebody's yanking on it because you said Original 6.
No, and I don't know. But they're a good example of timeless jerseys, and there's a lot of time, and it's just like some teams need them. Some teams look good with shoulder yokes, some teams don't. You don't have to put them, and that's kind of the issue that you and I have with the piping on the current Wild sweaters, on the Reds at least, and the Greens for sure.
Piping.
You don't need it. You don't need to point out where a player's freaking shoulders are. Mikko Koivu shows us often enough where his shoulder is. We don't need them to be outlined. It just seems like a bit much.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of history there because, really for the longest time they had the same jersey and then, the Reebok Edge kicked in, and so I guess, tip your cap to them. They didn't have any hot 90s jerseys, but like I said, came a couple decades too late with that cotton candy colored one that they just gave up last year.
Wait, so I forget, do we cover teams that moved? Can we talk about how beautiful the Nordiques jerseys were?
We can just save that for another podcast. I don't think we need to hit on.
We can shelve that. That's fine.
Old teams. Because I think we hit
I don't know
Carolina.
What we have.
I think we hit Carolina. And I don't think we did the Whalers because I think we viewed them as their own different entity.
Well, I think we talked about the Whalers a little bit with Carolina.
Did we?
I think we did. That might be the only one that we've done, though. We certainly didn't talk about the Colorado Rockies last week when we talked about the Devils. So we're not good at precedents here. But what else is new?
Well, we need a rule book. We need somebody to tell us what the hell the guidelines are. But
we don't even know.
I don't know. We can save the Nordiques because that's a glorious jersey that can get its own segment down the line.
That should have its own podcast.
We could save that for a summer show.
Yes, that's a good summer one. Good call.
So
good call.
I guess we'll
defunct
just kind of
podcast.
Yeah, we can do that. The defunct podcast. Maybe get Charlie back because the defunct host.
I smell second anniversary.
The second anniversary show. But, we can move on here.
Sure. What do we got now?
We got a little bit of college hockey experience under our belt in the last weekend. So I guess, do you have any hot scalding takes? Because as I may write about this week.
Sure.
Sometime.
Sure. So as we mentioned last week, Giles and I covered the NCHC. If you didn't hear it, I understand because the podcast wasn't wholly listenable. But, we covered the NCHC for collegehockeynews.com, and it was a good time. I mean, it was the first time I've ever been in a press box and only your second. So it was a unique experience covering an event like that, covering a 4-game tournament like that. And, there's a lot of stuff that I took away from it. It forced me to write into a different style that I'm not used to. And just covering the game, just being there, covering the game, and then going to a post-game presser, I mean, those were completely unique experiences to me. And, it was a lot of fun. It was a very valuable experience. And as far as the actual tournament itself, I think it was great. I think the North Dakota Duluth game on Friday afternoon was pretty fantastic. The game that night between Denver and St. Cloud was a little on the boring side for a 6-goal game, but and then the following day, the third place game, a little on the boring side again, but the championship game I thought was pretty entertaining. I thought it was a pretty good hockey game. Other than that, Sioux fans, Fighting Hawks fans, they travel well. Holy Christ. They had, I would say they almost filled the lower bowl for both of the North Dakota games. So that was one of the things that I don't want to say impressed by because it's not really that surprising, but I mean it was a little impressive how well they traveled, especially opposed to Minnesota teams who were a lot geographically closer than North Dakota and did not bring as many fans, not naming any names, Duluth and St. Cloud. But yeah, it was a good time. I mean, it was kind of an exhausting weekend, obviously. I mean, it felt like we were there for 48 hours straight. It really wasn't the case, but it kind of felt that way. And I don't know. I think it was overall a great experience. What were do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, as I probably hit on it at some point this week. Maybe not on Monday, but Tuesday maybe. But there's a lot of good college hockey this weekend, and to me, it felt like everyone was focusing more on the negatives of what was wrong with the sport than maybe what was good. And, There's problems. There's problem with the Big Ten. There's still problems with the NCHC. Obviously the Target Center wasn't filled, but it was probably the most attended conference tournament in the country.
Probably
I could be
was,
wrong, but and then that even cuts true to the Gopher women's in their national championship. Everyone was focusing on the fact that they weren't on TV, and it felt like what got lost in the fact was that was a really good hockey team, and they won the whole thing and are back-to-back national champions, 4 out of 5, and that was just kind of my biggest takeaway out of the weekend was, despite what's wrong with college hockey, there was still a lot of good hockey.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to fix some things that are clearly wrong with it, but the product is still good, and I don't know. That was my takeaway out of the weekend.
Yeah,
and, for a more Gopher-centric take, as being a Gopher fan that I am, I guess I think everyone had really high expectations on a team that was, very, young and inexperienced. They let, 8 players left the team last year to go to the NHL.
Yeah.
So we had low expectations coming in, and then they win the Big Ten regular season title. They lose in the conference tournament final, and they don't make the NCAA tournament. I probably would have taken that at the beginning of the season just on how low expectations were. And yet, people still seem to think Don Lucia is the problem. And, if he comes back next year, which, up in the air because he has 1 year left on his deal, but if he comes back next year, then I wouldn't be disappointed. I think they should be, they should be a good team. Everybody's got another year under their belt. Eric Shearhorn's a really good goaltender who should, win them hockey games, and they'll have some good scoring up front, and the defense has another year under their belt, and they're only a year away from Casey Middlestead. If last I looked, he was trying to maybe get out and trying to get into college a year early. So, I guess I think, next year and the year after are going to be certainly way better years for this team. So I wouldn't be disappointed in the slightest to see Don Lucia come back. But
that's the funny thing is that they. Okay, we're back. So
you didn't have to stop.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I shut the mic down to talk.
Yeah, when somebody comes up to talk to us, I don't know how to react exactly or what they want.
I figured you could have ad-libbed for a minute while I talked. But.
I could have. Anyway, I think you're right. I think the expectations for the Gophers were low until they win the Big Ten, which is like, okay, let's face it, that's next to meaningless. And then all of a sudden expectations are high. And it's like, well, why? Just because they won the regular season of a very, very down conference? Like, let's not kid ourselves. You saw what they did non-conference. It wasn't pretty. And so why all of a sudden are you enraged with the team because they didn't make, the NCAA tournament when, let's face it, I don't know that anybody expected them to start the season anyway. Were they a top 20 team to start the season? Maybe they were borderline, but even still, that's not good enough to get in necessarily.
I think the rankings had them very, very high, but that's just because there's a very Minnesota bias to those rankings.
Yeah, it's true.
So
it's true. There's a lot of good teams in the state as we saw this weekend.
I think it was, I don't know if I'd call him friend of the podcast, but just a friend of us on Twitter, Clarence Swamptown.
Yes.
I think he coined it perfectly when he said, the goal every year is just to make it to the NCAA tournament. And then, after that, it's a big crapshoot because in one-game playoffs for hockey, anything can happen, anything's possible.
Yep.
And that is exactly what you saw with the Gophers 2 years ago when they lost to Union in the final. That is a perfect example of a one game. Anything can happen. They lost 7-4, where a rock solid defense and goaltender just fell apart.
Yep.
And the Gophers didn't make it this year into the NCAA tournament, which, okay, you have a point there. They were bad. But, again, my point at the beginning was you knew they were going to be bad. Yeah. So they win a weak Big Ten, and, they're winning the conference tournament after 2 periods with a chance to go to the NCAA tournament. I guess I would like to see Lucia get next year with this team and see what he can do. And then if, they don't get to the NCAA tournament, then maybe make a move. Yeah, but
we'll see.
That's if he comes back.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents as somebody who loves the Gophers and wants the Gophers to do well. I know there's other people out there who are just firmly, tugging it on the one of us thing, and that Lucia's not one of us. But, my question to you is, who else is out there?
Yeah.
And as
Todd
as
Richards is out there. I beat you to it, sorry.
And Ben can vouch for this, but Saturday night after the game, it was put out by, I think, gopherhole.com tweeted it out that Charlie Walters of the Pioneer Press said that if Don Lucia is not retained as Gophers head coach, Todd Richards would be a top candidate for the position. Folks, let me tell you, as somebody who has watched the Gophers for most of his life, I am so wholeheartedly against that. I would rather have Don Lucia than Todd Richards. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You think it's bad, but think of what it could be with somebody else like Todd Richards. So please use common sense before you think somebody needs to be fired.
Like a Glenn Mason, Tim Brewster type situation?
That's a different thing. If you want to get into that, let's get our friend John Marthaler back in here.
We don't need to go down that path.
So, I guess that was my thing out of college hockey this weekend. I guess as a plug, thanks to College Hockey News for letting us help them cover the NCHC tournament.
Big thank to the great Nate Wells for referring us to said College Hockey News, because
Nate,
he can't be everywhere at once as much as he seems like he's everywhere at once.
Nate's kind of been a big... Nate's been a good influence, at least for me, for a lot of my time in the Wild blog community. So tip of the cap to him, and maybe in the summer months we'll have him on again as a guest.
Absolutely.
But, So I guess our final subject is nothing of a hockey-related matter. It's something that we need to clearly clear the air on, because good heavens, we need to do that. If you don't follow Ben and I on Twitter, we usually agree on most things.
Yeah,
at least everything. Maybe when it comes to hockey, other sports it might vary, but this particular subject is of a hot disagreement between us, and that is of the Minnesota Vikings quarterback. And if you're wondering why are we talking about the Minnesota Vikings quarterback on a podcast in March, I couldn't tell you either, but we need to clear the air.
Well, it's something that's been stewing for a while, and then I think what really kicked it off this week was the Mike Wallace comments about him wanting a strong-arm quarterback, and
I think that came on Monday,
something like that, and then you said the Sportive talked about it.
That kind of got buried in my my thoughts because of the way the Wild played in the last week. So here here's my sense on all of this.
Sure.
Is I think this is modeled after our friend Clarence Swamptown.
Sure.
And I think Teddy Bridgewater hasn't had a fair shake in his 2 years as Vikings quarterback. Why? Because the offensive line in front of him is a hot, steaming pile of garbage. Clearly, the Vikings have made it their objective to sign every offensive lineman this offseason to hopefully fix that problem so that when Ted goes back to pass, he has more than a half a second to throw the football. And I guess that's all I want. I want to see what he can do with, 2 seconds to throw the football, of which I can think he does all right with. He could do good from throwing the football after getting 2 decent seconds of protection. He hasn't had that.
No, I think those are very fair points. I don't disagree with. I don't disagree with any of those things. I think that he hasn't really gotten a fair shake. I think he was without AP for a season. That certainly doesn't help a young quarterback. I think that his offensive line was terrible.
They don't need Adrian Peterson. I'm sorry.
Well, okay, that's debatable
too. That's a hot take. You might as well just run the "Don't you hate pants"?
Don't you hate pants?
Somebody on K-Fan will probably disagree with me, but they don't need Adrian Peterson.
No, and
you
that's
can dump
fine.
him.
But I think, and this is kind of weird for me to even talk about it anyway, because if you know me, you know how much I hate the Vikings and how much I despise the attention they get in this town. So us talking about them on a March hockey podcast is really ironic for me. But no, it's a good discussion, so I'll have it. My root criticism of Teddy Bridgewater is that I don't think he is going to be a star. I think that, and I don't want to throw the whole game manager thing at him because that just comes off as way more of an insult than it's supposed to be, I think, in a lot of instances. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of people in this market that swear to you up and down that he is going to be Aaron Rodgers, that he is going to be Drew Brees in his prime. He's going. I don't think that he's that kind of guy. I think his ceiling is, a barely top 10 quarterback in the league. And I don't know much, but that's just kind of the feeling that I get from it. For the little bit of him that I saw in college and the very little bit that I've seen of him for the Vikings, I think there's a lot of people that swing from his jock, and maybe it's in response to the haters. But I just can't. Even if I was a Vikings fan, I can't see myself swinging from that guy's jock that much.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe I do swing his jock, I guess. But, do I think he'll be the best quarterback in the league someday? No.
Okay.
But I think he can be a top 10 quarterback. But, I guess with the way the Vikings are kind of modeling their team, they don't necessarily need a top 5 or maybe even top 10 quarterback.
No, they don't.
They're clearly taking a run at having an elite defense. Mm-hmm. And as we saw in the Super Bowl this year, an elite defense can win you a Super Bowl because Peyton Manning can't throw the football more than 10 yards down the field, and yet he has his second Super Bowl ring. Yeah. So,
I think that's totally fair, but that's just kind of been my thing because I feel like, and I understand where the love for Teddy comes from because it's in response because a lot of people say a lot of really negative things about Teddy, and I'm not quite that negative about it. Like I don't think that he is like terrible or awful or whatever, but it's just like I think that the people who defend him and like you and Clarence, I think you guys go, you compensate for the hate by saying things about his potential that I don't necessarily buy into it, and I don't think we're far off. I think we're not far off at all. But it's the nuances, that separate us. So that's
maybe he can't throw the deep pass like top quarterbacks in the league can, sure. But you've seen him make throws that maybe not every quarterback out there can.
Sure.
and throwing him into tight spots, and when he's gotten a fair amount of time to throw.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the weird thing about the Wallace comments. I don't know what your feelings on him were, but it's like, what Wallace said wasn't super classy, obviously. I mean, but he was asked a question and he answered it honestly, and it was just like, well, yeah, Teddy Bridgewater doesn't have the strongest arm in the NFL, and Joe Flacco does have a stronger arm than Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think that's even debatable. Bridgewater just comes off as more of like an accuracy-based quarterback, and he's going to be a high completion percentage kind of guy, a high quarterback rating kind of guy. But what Mike Wallace was saying was that he's a burner. He wants a guy who can throw a deep ball because whether Wallace is able to catch it or not, which is very debatable. That's what Wallace wants, and so I mean, does he come off as sounding a little sour? Maybe he does, but I wasn't like completely enraged by Wallace's comments like a lot of Vikings fans were. It's like, okay, well, he answered the question honestly. Is it a dick move to say those things?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. I don't even think it's that bad. Okay. Well, I thought he was just being honest, and
I thought there were a fair amount of opportunities for Mike Wallace, and he dropped them all. Our friend Parker Hageman had a very good line of Mike Wallace's season, and it's just that if you just drop the golden opportunities you get,
you really have no room to complain.
You.
I understand.
So,
and I'm not making excuses for Mike Wallace saying that he didn't succeed because of Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think that's the case either. But it is what it is.
What's funny was all season I told my friend McKinley, who was a big Vikings fan, much bigger than I am. Like, I'm just kind of borderline Vikings fan all the time. But I told him all year the downfall of this team was their offensive line.
Yeah.
Their poor offensive line is just going to lose them the game they needed to win.
Yeah.
And in the playoff game, Teddy Bridgewater drove them down the field that they needed to win. He drove them down the field. He put them in the spot to win, and the kicker lost again. If Teddy Bridgewater drives them down the field, Blair Walsh hits the field goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they probably get waxed by Carolina.
Right. That's a different thing. Like,
but I understand what you're saying.
That was the winnable game right there.
Yep.
They had that game.
Yeah. And it would have been a hell of a sending off party for TCF Stadium too.
It just I think people might maybe think a lot differently of Teddy Bridgewater if they won that game, but
you might be right.
I don't know. I just think you give him an offensive line, you give him time to throw the football. Sure, he can't throw the deep pass maybe as well as others, but I just think you get him some decent linemen. He can do good, but. As long as you have Adrian Peterson in the backfield, I guess we'll never really know because the Vikings are just clearly going to cater to Adrian Peterson, which I loathe to no end.
Yeah, I can understand that.
So, I guess, I guess we can maybe cut it off there.
Wrap it up,
we've run a good amount of time, and
is it past midnight already?
It's way past midnight. It's way past my bedtime, and I got to hit the trough before we leave here. So,
I hear you.
As you tell, I'm just dancing all over the place here. But thank you. Thank you to everyone for listening, for coming back again.
Especially after last week.
I'll clearly promote this to no end that we have good audio quality now.
Studio level, kind of.
Again, thanks to Carrie for putting on the party tonight here at Tom Reid's for all of us wild Twitter faithful, I guess. Thanks to Tom Reid's for continuing to serve me alcohol. And clearly, they have some kind of a tab on their computer screen that says Giles.
It's just the Giles button.
Yeah, that's
2-for-1 Molson's. Go.
So, just push the button. So, we'll be back next week. Not sure where, not sure when. Maybe
figure it
we'll round up a guest. I don't know.
Who knows?
We'll see what happens.
Anything's possible.
It'll be after the Colorado game, so either way, I'll be full of emotion. So you probably won't want to miss that, one way or the other. So, yeah, we will talk to you next week.
I'll wave my private parts at your aunties, you cheesy lot of second-hand electric donkey-bottom biters!